Hi, I'm Meg, and I'm in a very difficult situation. This can be called a love triangle, but in reality, everything is much more complicated. Listen to me, please. Suddenly advise how to behave. We met Michael in a cafe. I took the only empty seat next to a handsome stranger. He smiled at me. That's how we got to know each other. It turned out that Michael, like me, was in his senior year. But he studies remotely, as he devotes all his time to singing and dancing, and also goes to acting classes. Michael was so focused. And I liked him right away. And it turned out that it was mutual because the next day, Michael asked me on a date in a cafe, and everything started spinning. I was in seventh heaven. After all, I have such a talented guy, but I didn't rejoice for long. Why? I'll tell you in a minute. But for now, please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. Thank you. We met for about a month, but began to see each other less and less. Michael was on his nerves, soon casting in a new youth group where he madly wanted to get into. I understood everything and supported him very much. Casting has been successfully completed. Michael was chosen from hundreds of applicants, and the jury liked him so much that he was offered a personal project. The producer wanted to turn Michael into a real idol. I already imagined all the girls in the class would be jealous of me when they found out that I was dating a real star. The next day, Michael left for rehearsals. He was busy from early morning until late at night. At first, he excitedly wrote to me how everything was going, but after a week, the messages from him stopped. He also did not answer calls. But I understood everything. My boyfriend works hard to become famous. Once I came to school, I noticed that the girls were discussing something enthusiastically. Looking over one of them, I saw photos of my Michael. It turned out that he has a new account in social networks, which is being actively promoted. There are videos from rehearsals and Michael's streams and even spicy photos from training. And what is most surprising, now he is not Michael, but Jean. Classmates vied with each other discussing him, looking for merch with the image of Jin, and I wanted to scream. This is my boyfriend. Do not touch him. I'm over it. I don't want to share it with anyone. I called Michael, but he didn't answer. I called his producer, threw a tantrum, and he said that we can meet in the evening with Jean. I was hoping that we will talk with my boyfriend. I will tell about my feelings, and we will find a way out of this impasse. But Michael just handed me a list of rules that are written in his contract. He has no right to date anyone. Relationships can be started, but everything must be hidden from the public. I'm not allowed to like his photo on social networks and to correspond on his page. And if anyone finds out about us, Michael must deny everything. Like, we don't know her, and I came up with everything. This is the answer prepared for the press. And what kind of relationship will this be, Michael? You better call me Jean, Meg. Another person was looking at me. Sleek, handsome, with a pumped-up body, inexpensive clothes, but with empty, tired eyes. Not my Michael. Tears choked me, and in order not to burst into tears right there, I ran away. Needless to say, Michael did not even try to catch up with me. Weeks went by. I didn't leave the house. I always took everything very close to my heart, but this time, I covered it to the fullest. There was no appetite. I started losing weight rapidly. Everything around suddenly lost its colors and became black and white. I could look at pictures of Michael for hours. During this time, his career began to gain momentum. The first single was released, which hit the top of the charts. The shooting of the video was being prepared, rehearsals were in full swing, and the worst thing is that Michael appeared at events hugging different girls. Models, bloggers, aspiring singers. I understood that these were just mutually beneficial agreements, but it still hurt me a lot. Seeing that I was getting worse and worse, my mother dragged me to a psychologist. I already had experienced with her when my father died, and then therapy helped me a lot. The first few sessions were unbearable. I sobbed a lot, but it helped clear up the picture. I fell in love with this beautiful picture called Michael, became obsessed with him, and now I'm withdrawal. The psychologist explained that I needed to find myself, understand who I am, love yourself, become significant to yourself, and stop looking for an idol. Honestly, I didn't understand how this could be done. I'm an ordinary girl with no special talents. Sometimes I draw scribbles when I'm nervous. It helps. And the psychologist seized on it. I started going to art therapy. Then I went to art school, and it really took me. I drew all the time, studied art history, attended various master classes, brilliantly passed the exam papers at the end of the year, and my teacher took some of my works to the exhibition. I came to the opening. The art gallery was in the center of the city. The exhibition is big, and there were a lot of people from the very beginning. I stood, looked at my canvases, and did not believe that it was me who painted it. Very interesting solution, right? There was an attractive guy next to me. He looked at my paintings appraisingly. Emotions raged inside, so I could only nod in response. Do you know who the author is? I would like to purchase them. I'm the author, I whispered. The guy immediately smiled warmly and extended his hand to me. My name is Derek. I am fond of art, especially this direction. Are the paintings for sale? He had such big shiny eyes that I began to drown in them. Derek was 24 years old. He just graduated from university. I have always been fond of art, interior design, and now I am looking for myself. Parents are doing a comprehensive renovation in the house and asked him to fill the space of the house with interesting paintings. And now my paintings will fit perfectly into the interior. Derek told me this in a cozy cafe, where he invited me to sit after the exhibition. And he asked me to draw a few more paintings in the same style. He bought all of my works, and for good money. I couldn't believe it. But after that, orders poured in on me. There were even regular customers. I was able to help my mother, and I constantly wanted to pinch myself. Is this really happening to me for real? Derek started courting me. Dinners, walks on the water, excursions to museums. With each new meeting, we realized that we had a lot in common. I shared everything with him, but kept quiet about the story with Michael. I stopped following him a long time ago. There was neither time nor desire for this. After a couple of months, Derek suggested that I organize my own exhibition. He took care of all the technical issues. He found a hall, paid for several articles about me in the media, invited the right people, and the show went great. The entire urban beau monde gathered. Several paintings were bought at once. Many wanted to collaborate with me. I don't even know how to thank you, Derek. I hugged him tightly after the show. For the first time, they took such care of me and my interests. To celebrate this event, Derek invited me to his house. Look how your first canvases fit into the interior. Parents are just delighted. And they really want to get to know you. When I saw Derek's house and his parents, I was shocked. He was huge! Just a palace! I had no idea that Derek's family was so rich. His parents greeted me very warmly. We chatted in the living room, discussing my work. There was a feeling that we had known each other for a very long time. Music was playing. We were all laughing loudly at something when suddenly Derek's mother abruptly stumbled and looked at the door. I followed her gaze and almost froze. Michael stood on the threshold of the room. He was pale. There were dark shadows under his eyes. His hands were hidden in his pockets. And his eyes! He seemed to be looking through us. Derek's mom ran up to him and pulled him out of the room by the hand. Dad followed her. Derek and I were alone in the room. I was silent, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Suddenly, Derek said in a low voice, "I'm sorry. He wasn't supposed to be here. It can be seen that the nurse has gone somewhere, but he is harmless." "Who is he?" And Derek explained that it was his younger brother, Michael. That he dreamed all his life of becoming popular, of becoming an idol, so that thousands of girls all over the world would go crazy for him. But in the end, I almost went crazy myself. He could not stand the competition, strict rules, the resume, and also with the girl he loved. The producers forced him to disperse. Now he is on sedatives, undergoing therapy, and I hope the moment will come when our cheerful and smiling Michael will return to himself. This story gave me goosebumps. So Michael didn't cope. And apparently, today he didn't recognize me. Because of the sedatives? I didn't know how to react to this. Should I tell Derek that the girl Michael was forced to break up with was me? Derek interrupted my thoughts by suggesting a walk in the evening garden. A month has passed since then. I fall more and more in love with Derek. Attentive, caring, able to appreciate me. Yesterday he offered to live together. And also gave a ring. Yes, yes, Derek and I are now engaged. I am well received in his family. My mother gets along well with Derek. And only I sometimes wake up in the night in a cold sweat. The secret about my relationship with Michael haunts me. I saw him a few more times, but Michael does not react to me in any way. Should I tell Derek about everything? After all, everything's secret always becomes clear. What if it ruins our relationship? I don't know what to do. What would you do? Write in the comments. I'll be waiting. I am Carol. I recently turned 18. And now, I'm going to pick up my mother from a mental hospital. Yes, it sounds terrible, but there is no other way. Every 6 months, she undergoes therapy in the hospital in order to forget those terrible incidents that happened before my birth. I will tell you everything in detail. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. And here is my mom. Hey Mom, how are you? I'm fine, darling. I really want to go home. Half an hour later, I was already in the kitchen brewing strong tea, and my mother was luxuriating in the bathroom. Still, spending 2 weeks in a mental hospital is another test. But now my mother will be in a good mood and have a good sleep. She will smile again and stop yelling at me for no reason. This horror is periodically repeated due to the fact that 20 years ago, my mother and then a young girl, Susie, managed to work for a wealthy family. With the owner, Mr. Edwards, she was on excellent terms. But his wife, Miranda, terribly hated her. Mom said that she was always dissatisfied with her work. Mr. Edwards always stood up for my mother, which made his wife go crazy. And one day, she did a terrible thing. Mom told me the story hundreds of times, and each time her voice trembled. Mr. and Mrs. Edwards were going to spend the weekend at the summer house by the lake. The servants were dismissed in advance. Only my mother remained. And while Mr. Edwards started the car and put things in the trunk, Miranda instructed my mother to go down to the cellar for apricot jam. The cellar was dark and deep, and as soon as Susie went downstairs, the cellar door slammed shut. The girl was consumed by darkness. She heard the sound of a car driving away and realized with horror that she was alone in the estate. The hosts will return in 3 days. Mom has always been afraid of closed spaces, and these 3 days in the cellar hit hard on her psyche. There was no light. The candle quickly burnt out, but Susie never found the matches. At this point, my mother always started to cry. Since then, my mother's life has gone downhill. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't be alone. Soon Mr. Edwards fired her. And if not for my dad, who knows what would have happened to poor Susie? But happiness was short-lived. Shortly after my birth, Dad got hit by a truck and Mom was alone again. She did not give up because it was necessary to raise me. She worked 2 jobs without days off and holidays. My mother coped with everything. But when I grew up a little, I began to notice that my mother has periods of aggression that she cannot cope with. And also insomnia, which turns into apathy. We went with her to the doctor, and after a thorough analysis, he attributed to my mother twice a year to go to a mental hospital for treatment. And it really helped. But every time I take my mother away from another therapy, I promise myself that I will find this damned Edwards family and take revenge on them for all my mother's suffering. Hey, be quiet! Suddenly, a male voice rang out in my ear. Thinking about Maya, I turned into the school parking lot and did not notice the guy who was crossing the road. Big blue eyes, playful bangs, a pleasant smile. He looked at me in surprise. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I barely squeezed out.
So, as a penalty, you invite me to coffee today. I'm Kevin, by the way.
Carol, then at 6?
Write me.
And Kevin handed me some crumpled piece of paper on which his phone number was hastily written. So I haven't met guys yet. Moreover, it turns out that I invited him on a date, and he did not invite me. Not bad. It turned out that Kevin was recently in our city, and he studies in a parallel class. His dad has a construction business, so Kevin often moves from one city to another. We sat in the cafe for 3 hours, and it was so comfortable with him. He chatted, laughed, told various interesting things. I would listen to him endlessly. We met the next day at school, and seeing Kevin made my heart beat faster. After the lessons, he gently took my hand and we went for a walk in the park. Until the evening, Kevin did not let me go, and I didn't want to leave. At parting, he hugged me and whispered in my ear, "I'm so glad you didn't run over me in the parking lot. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to kiss you right now." And our lips met. I returned home when it was already quite dark. My head was spinning slightly from the new sensations. Mom was waiting for me at the door. "Why are you so late? Who are you with?" She coldly looked at me. "What a stupid smile on your face, Carol!" I tried to calm her down, when suddenly the same piece of paper with Kevin's phone number fell out of my pocket. Mom picked it up and suddenly her face changed dramatically. "Where did you get it?" On the back of the piece of paper was printed, "Colin Edwards, owner," and just below, "Build Capital Construction Company." I told my mom about Kevin. She just kept silent and how madly I began to fall in love with him. "Do you know who he is?" "The son of our worst enemy. The one that ruined my life." It was as if I had been doused with cold water. The guy I liked so much is my enemy? My mom paced the room nervously, and her eyes shone terribly. "You should win him over, Carol. In the meantime, I'll find a way how to ruin the Edwards family's life." And my mother laughed so wildly that goosebumps ran up my back. The next day, I avoided Kevin as much as I could. But after school, he blocked my path.
Carol, what happened? I wanted to invite you to dinner, and you seem to be running away from me.
"What?"
"In the evening at my house. Dinner with parents. Please don't give up. My parents are really cool, and they really want to get to know you."
On wadded legs, I entered the luxurious living room in Kevin's house. Kevin's parents came up to greet me. Mom hugged me warmly. Dad shook my hand. They seemed so sincere and kind. It didn't fit in my head that once this cheerful woman pushed my mother into the cellar, and this funny man then threw the poor girl out into the street. These thoughts made my head spin, and I rested my chin with my right hand wearily. Kevin's mom was saying something funny, and suddenly she stopped, staring at me. "Where did you get that?" she whispered in a low voice. Before I knew it, Mrs. Edwards grabbed my right arm and began to examine my little birthmark on my wrist. It was very tiny, but clearly reminiscent of a flower. "Lily! We named you Lily as a flower, seeing this tiny speck on your hand." Mrs. Edwards rushed to hug me. Her husband looked at me like I was a ghost. Kevin was confusedly silent.
"Are you really our Lily?"
Kevin's dad suddenly burst into tears and told a terrible story.
18 years ago,
their little daughter was kidnapped. Suspicion fell on a young maid who had been fired the week before. She had bouts of aggression, and everyone in the house was afraid of her. "And the maid's name was Susie, right?" I asked dryly. Mr. Edwards nodded his head. I suddenly felt sick. It turns out I'm Lily, not Carol. And I was raised not by my own mother, but by a crazy woman. And also, I fell in love with my own brother? This is just insane. Kevin? My brother? As if reading my mind, Kevin said quietly,
"I was adopted, baby. Shortly after you were kidnapped."
Oh, it's like a stone has been lifted from my shoulders. "Darling," Miranda grabbed my hand. "We can't lose you again. Just do not go away." Mr. Edwards smiled.
"We will never part again. But first, we need to decide something."
And I understood what he meant. An hour later, my house, where I grew up, was surrounded by police. The woman who raised me was in handcuffs. She was charged. I moved to live with my family. Kevin and I were very attracted to each other. But so far, we have taken a break in the relationship. I need to figure everything out now. I don't quite understand how I should feel about Susie, the woman who kidnapped me. She was never able to explain why she did it. She said she just wanted to get back at the Edwards family for getting fired. But she loved me. She took care of me, raised me. So I'm not indifferent to her. I can't call her my mom,
but just erase from memory too? How to behave? Maybe you have thoughts on this. What would you do? Right. I need advice right now.
My name is Amber. It is very difficult for me to trust people because from the very childhood, my closest ones betrayed me. Look, my life was nearly ruined, and now I'm trying to recover. Until the age of 7, I had the usual happy childhood. Mom, dad, and a year younger sister, Beth. We lived outside the city and spent all of our times indoors. But the fact that they loved Beth more than I really messed things up. They never asked how I was, did not regret if I fell off the bike and broke my knee, did not hug or kiss me. But as soon as Beth whimpered, both dad and mom immediately began to worry. As I grew up, their indifference towards me also grew. I even thought that maybe I was adopted. That's why they treat me like that. And when it was time for me to go to school, something terrible happened. I'll tell you everything in a minute, but for now, please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. Thank you. So the summer was coming to an end. Once returning from a walk, near the house I saw an old car. And when I entered the house, I froze. 2 of my suitcases were collected in the corridor. An unfamiliar woman was sitting in the kitchen. I didn't like her right away. And when my mother saw me, she saw that today I was going to a boarding school. I will live and study there. I realized that they want to get rid of me forever. I started crying and asking my mother not to do this. But no one heard me. Miss Morton was the name of the woman who came to pick me up. She was a boarding school teacher and an old friend of her mother. Grabbing my hand, she pulled me into the car. I spent the next 5 years in a boarding school. There were very strict rules here. Everything was scheduled by the hour, and it was necessary to unconditionally adhere to the regime. Otherwise, punishment. I adapted to the school rules. But still, she didn't trust anyone. She was on her own. One afternoon, I heard terrible screams in the hallway of the school and saw Miss Morton wringing the hands of a strange girl. "Miss Morton, please! I can talk to her and explain to her how to behave." I approached them. The teacher nodded at me. I never rebelled, so I earned some trust in school. She left, and I carefully looked at the girls. "I won't live here. This must be hell. My parents decided to punish me for bad behavior, but it's terrible." "You'd better calm down. Let's go," I whispered. I was able to calm down Susie, that was the name of the girl, and they put her in my room. We suddenly became friends. She said that she was from a very rich family, and her parents always spoiled her. But recently she got in touch with a bad company, started to conflict with mom and dad, left home. Therefore, she was assigned here. So strange. It turns out that Susie was placed here because her parents love her a lot and they are afraid of losing her. And me, because no one needs me in this world. I told Susie my story, and we sobbed together for a long time. Her parents arrived 2 months later. They turned out to be very nice people, especially her mother. "Amber, Susie told us your story. We want to take you into our family, if you don't mind. You will become a sister to Susie and a daughter to us." I was so happy. At the age of 13, I finally felt so much love and concern. My happiness was not overshadowed even by the news that, it turns out, my biological parents wrote a rejection of me a long time ago. Susie and I started going to an elite school, and she introduced me to everyone as her sister, so another 4 years flew by. I have a boyfriend, Kevin now. He was the son of friends of my new parents, and we met at a dinner party. We were good together. For the winter holidays, he invited me to spend the weekend by the ocean. Kevin booked a luxurious hotel room on the beach. Such beauty was simply breathtaking. We planned to go snorkeling. Kevin encouraged me to go diving. We laughed, argued, hugged each other, waiting at the reception of the administrator. "How can I help you, young people?" Suddenly came from behind, and goosebumps ran down my back. It was my biological mother. "Hello," as if nothing had happened, she said. I was furious. "How? Where?" Pulling a surprised Kevin into a corner, I whispered, "We need to find another hotel. I don't like it here." But Kevin was nodding his head. There are very few hotels on the island and there were no rooms available when he booked. "Okay. I won't let her spoil my holiday, but I won't talk to her either." We settled in the room.
The view from the window was magnificent. The weather is fantastic, but I was actually very nervous. After lunch at the hotel restaurant, we went for a swim in the ocean. Kevin rented a yacht. We went on board and settled down on the upper deck. Everything was perfect. "Welcome aboard, young people!" And I was shocked again. As a child, this voice often scolded and scolded me for even the smallest misconduct. It was my biological father. He stood and squinted from the sun on the deck of the yacht. Well, that was too much. What's going on here? This is not a random meeting, Kevin. Did you do that? I didn't want to admit it, but there were no other explanations. Amber, give them a chance to explain themselves, please. They regret what they did to you. I don't believe a single word they say, Kevin. And now I don't believe you either. How could you? Suddenly, my father stepped towards me. Kevin, thank you for helping us. Now I'm on my own. We need to talk to Amber, alone. But seeing the panic on my face, Kevin protested. Father did not tolerate when someone began to argue with him. Without thinking twice, he jumped up to Kevin and pushed him hard. A minute later, the guy disappeared under the water. Don't worry, daughter. We're close to the coast. He will get out. Mommy and I need your help. I didn't even have time to blink my eyes when suddenly my father grabbed my waist with one hand and covered my mouth with another. In the palm of his hand was some kind of cloth or a handkerchief. I took a deep breath, wanted to scream, but instead everything swam before my eyes. I woke up in the hospital. I was in the room. Hands and feet were tied. My biological mother stood next to me and smiled contentedly. Hi, darling. You've come to your senses. Great. Everything is ready for the operation. The nurse will be here soon. What have you done to me? I barely whispered. So far, nothing, but you will become a donor for our Beth. You are the older sister, so you should always help the younger one. I hoped this was a terrible dream. I couldn't move. A terrible weakness, and there was a crazy woman standing nearby who wanted to use me for some of her diabolical purposes. You abandoned me, threw it out like a kitten on the street, do you remember? Leave me alone! Help! I understood that I needed to attract the attention of the staff in order to stop this switch. But suddenly something sharp pierced my hand, and I lost my mind. I don't know how long I was so unconscious, but as if through thick glass I heard Kevin's voice. Amber! Amber, wake up! I opened my eyes. An operating room, some instruments. To my left, a girl was lying on the operating table. She seemed to be sleeping. An alarmed Kevin leaned over me. Are you okay? With difficulty, I nodded in response. I'll get you out of here. The police have already surrounded the building. Your biological parents cannot escape. I nodded back and drifted off to sleep. A week has passed since that day. I am at home, under the supervision of doctors. I come to my senses. Kevin and Susie never leave my side. Parents, I'm talking about Susie's mom and dad, also constantly ask how I am. And I'm fine because I'm surrounded by people who love me. The story of my insane biological parents who kidnapped me made the news. They are in custody and an investigation is underway. As it turned out, my mother had suffered from schizophrenia for a long time, and recently her condition worsened. She kept Beth, my little sister, locked up under total control, giving her constant sedatives. Due to stress and medication, Beth became ill. Her kidneys began to fail. And my mother decided that I would become a donor for her beloved Beth. He and my dad found out where I lived, put me under surveillance, and got Kevin to help them. Of course, they explained to him that they just wanted to talk to me and ask for forgiveness for abandoning me. And they themselves began to implement their crazy plan. There, on the yacht, when Kevin found himself in the water, he was lucky. The rescuers noticed a man in the water and pulled him out. He did not find the yacht, but he was able to find me using the application on his phone. The beacon indicated that I was in the local hospital. Kevin didn't hesitate. He called the police, let Susie's parents know, and risked everything to sneak into the hospital to save me. And he did it! They did not manage to do any harm to me, although Beth, under anesthesia, was already waiting for my kidney in the operating room. Now I constantly replay this story in my head. I'm lucky to have loving people around me who will always come to help and never betray. It remains only to learn to trust them, which is very, very difficult for me. But I will try. I hope you liked my story. Thanks for watching to the end. For this, you have a prize. Write in the comments what name would you like to give the heroine in the next story. I will wait.
Hello, I am Emmy. I am 15 and I am the most ordinary schoolgirl. We say about such people, an invisible person. But it turned out that if you offend me, I can get very angry and aggressive. And then, keep your eyes open. Although, since childhood, my mother kept telling me, Emmy, you're a girl. You must be gentle and soft. Don't get bullied. Don't fight. You are a princess. And I tried. Really. Another children take away my toy, and I smile. I get a slap on the back of the head from a girlfriend in the park. I bite my teeth and endure. At school, anyone could bully me. I did not give change to anyone because I am a princess. Calm, sweet, and boring. This is how I was when I was 15. I walked down the school corridor with my head down. 3 more lessons and home. Then homework, we'll bake an apple pie with Mom, a TV series for the night, and sleep.
Hey, get out of my way!
Suddenly sounded over my head. I jumped up in surprise. The tall guy practically pinned me to the school locker and rushed on like a whirlwind. The other guys were running after him. Oh, those guys! They think everything is allowed. I mumbled under my breath, getting ready for class. The bell rang. The mathematician entered the classroom. A minute later, the door to the classroom opened with a roar, and on the threshold stood the same guy who almost knocked me down in the corridor.
Can I come in? My name is Dylan. I'm new. Sorry for the delay.
And he smiled so charmingly at the teacher that she nodded in response. And it was not only the teacher who was shocked. I felt with my back how all the girls in the class sighed noisily. Dylan was a cute guy who was very self-confident. And then, the unexpected happened. Please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell, and I will continue. Dylan's eyes scanned the classroom as he slowly moved down the aisle. A minute later, I heard a sugary hello. The guy landed on the only empty seat in the class, and it was right next to me. Lessons passed in a blur. My hands, knees, even my teeth sometimes trembled. Dylan saw that I was nervous, and he added fuel to the fire. It's as if he accidentally touches me with his elbow, and then he drops the pen from my side. After the lessons, I flew out of the classrooms like a bullet. Hurry up! Get out of here! Where are you in a hurry? Right at the exit from school, I ran into Heather, our queen bee in the class. She stood with her arms outstretched belligerently and looked at me defiantly. Heather was a star, beautiful, long-legged, with luxurious hair. She knew her worth and did not know my name. Yes, she peered at me, trying to remember, but in vain. The RAM in her head was not enough to store the name of some moth. In short, you do not even look at him. I'm getting this handsome guy, understood? And Heather loomed over me, flashing her brightly painted eyes. I nodded quickly and ran away. Yes, take this Dylan with giblets for yourself. Painfully needed. The next day at school, the place next to me was occupied. Heather shoved her friend across the desk into it, and the empty space was now, of course, next to Heather. But Dylan didn't show up to school that day, and the next one too. Girlfriend again moved to Heather. A week later, late again. Dylan appeared on the threshold of the class again. And sure enough, he landed next to me again. Behind Heather, she growled softly in impotence. And I was so glad to see him that I even whispered, "Hello." He smiled but did not say anything in response. Yes, I understand. Who am I to greet him? Another empty seat in the classroom. After school, I hurried home. There was no mood at all. And suddenly something hit me in the back. I turned around. Heather. This snake threw an apple at my back. And this girl has more than enough strength because her shoulder began to ache. If you talk to him again, I'll knock your teeth out. Got it? Well, how can I compete with this long-legged otter in heels? And I slowly began to back up in order to have time to escape at the right moment. And rested against something soft and warm. Dylan. I pressed against his chest. He looked at me in surprise, then at Heather.
Girls, what are you doing here? Battle on apples?
He picked up from the ground the same green weapon that flew at me a couple of minutes ago. Heather immediately turned into a soft, fluffy kitten. She said, "Yes, we're just here. These are such jokes, and..."
Stupid jokes. If you hit Emily in the head, there would be a bruise or even a concussion. This is not a joke.
Heather turned pale. She realized that her chance to quickly and successfully seduce the handsome man was missed, and I wanted to jump for happiness. He knows my name. He knows.
Let's go. I'll take you so that you don't fall under apple shelling again.
And we with him, showing the back of the stunned Heather, walked down the street. Thank you for standing up. I didn't really know how to start a conversation.
Dylan looked at me carefully. You need to put her in her place. Otherwise, it will never end. Or do you like being a whipping girl?
That's how I was raised. I don't fight. I don't swear. I don't fight.
Dylan chuckled. You have to be able to stand up for yourself. You will become more confident. You'll be reckoned with. I'll help you if you let me.
This guy knew how to surprise. An hour later, we entered a small hall. In the middle was a boxing ring. There was a big pair. Dylan handed me boxing gloves, but the girls do not.
I began to argue. Don't fight, I remember. But boxing is not about fighting. It's about the ability to take a hit.
Dylan showed me a couple of tricks, told me how to move around the ring. We spent over an hour in the hall. I even hit the bag a couple of times. It was such an interesting feeling. For the first time, hit back. After training, we sat for a while in a pizzeria. Dylan showed me his photo from 3 years ago, and I was shocked. A thin, round-shouldered guy with frightened eyes was looking at me. It's you! Dylan nodded and said that he, too, was the same inconspicuous empty place as I was. But one day, a big gang of teenagers beat him half to death. He was in the hospital for almost a month, and there he was, helped by the attending physician. Every day, he motivated Dylan, supported him, told him that he had to learn how to take a punch, and then he took me to boxing, and it helped a lot. There was no trace of that frightened boy, and Dylan promised himself to help the same insecure teenagers as he was. From that day on, little inconspicuous Emmy, that is, me, began to change. I ran to boxing training 3 times a week. I began to notice changes in the mirror. Walking became more confident. I stopped slouching, began to walk with my head held high. Thanks to the physical body tightened, and I changed my baggy sweatpants to tight jeans. Dylan noticed my transformations and constantly praised for perseverance and work. And I fell in love. Ran to school to see Dylan. I tried to come to boxing training to catch him. I was ready to listen to his stories about self-confidence until the night. But he looked at me like a friend. There was never even a hint of sympathy. He respected, praised me, joked, smiled, and I wanted him to hold me tight and kiss me. 2 months have passed. I began to like myself, and I started to like other guys. Suddenly, Emmy became noticeable. Once in the locker room, we ran into Heather. She, as usual, tried to push me away to get through, but I grabbed her hand tightly and looked straight into her eyes. Look, next time you will be torn off the wall. From that moment on, I was no longer afraid of anyone. Of course, an hour later, the whole school was whispering about it. Dylan laughed for a long time when I told him in colors how Heather turned pale and slid down the wall after my firm grip. That's your merit, Dylan. He believed in me. And I, on emotions, threw myself on his neck and hugged him tightly, kissed him. Dylan froze in place.
Don't, Emmy.
He gently took my hands off my neck.
It's your merit. You have changed yourself. You have become the Emmy you always wanted to be. And I'm very proud of you.
It was painful. He does not like me. Everyone around likes me, but he does not. I wanted to hide somewhere in the corner and sob. I trudged home, locked myself in the room, and laid down in bed, just staring at the ceiling. I didn't want anything. I fell asleep, woke up late at night. My stomach rumbled, and I quietly opened the door. Suddenly, my parents had already settled down. I stomped into the kitchen for something to eat, but someone was in the kitchen. I heard my mother's voice. I understand everything. Yes, thank you for helping her so much. She really has changed. Got more confident. Then we closed the contract and payment on the card. Dylan, thanks again. Dylan? Contract? Payment? What's happening? I ran into the kitchen, barely holding back tears. Darling, I thought you were sleeping. Dylan was friends with me for money? Did you hire him? Dylan is a very smart and talented guy. He's almost a genius. Helped so many teenagers. And helped you. Mom obviously couldn't find the words. A step away from hysteria, I ran to my room and locked myself in the room. He couldn't fall in love with me. I was just a project for him. Dylan never showed up at school again.
They said he transferred to another school. I wasn't surprised. I knew I would never see him again. But this time, I didn't give up. Continued training, and soon I even went on a date with one guy from a parallel class. The school year is over. It's already summer. It was only now that I realized that I was no longer mad at Dylan. The insults are gone, gratitude remains. The student fell in love with her mentor. What's so strange? But he really helped me a lot. I have learned to take a hit. I hope you enjoy this story, although a bit sad. And you too will straighten your shoulders, raise your head higher, and enjoy life. Hi all, my name is Heather, and I'm considered the coolest girl in school. Don't believe? Judge for yourself. I am from a rich family, and I have everything I want. Since the age of 5, I have been participating in beauty contests. I have many girlfriends, and any guy dreams of me paying attention to him. But I don't like any of them, and all because I fell in love with the biggest loser of our school. Now I will tell you how it happened and what came out of it. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. The loser's name is Ted, and he transferred to our school last year, and I didn't like him right away. Thick lenses, boring clothes, clumsy gait, and even his bewildered appearance did not arouse interest. From the first day of school, Ted was dubbed the main loser of the school, and no one wanted to be friends with him. Sometimes the girls and I discussed his goofy look and laughed from the huge braces on his teeth, but mostly I didn't notice him, like Ted didn't exist. So it was until one moment, until we were put at the same desk in physics and assigned a joint project. After school, Ted and I stayed alone and spent several hours studying together. And you know, he turned out to be so cool. I was shocked. Ted was passionate about his studies. He read a whole bunch of books and was much more interesting than all the guys I studied with. We talked all day, and in the evening, Ted took me home. We agreed to spend every Thursday after school together and prepare for classes. And over time, I couldn't wait until Thursday finally arrived. I constantly thought about what I would tell him, what I would hear, and how we would spend this day. Although I liked this guy, I was very shy to communicate with him in front of everyone. At school, they continued to laugh at Ted, and I walked by, nodded to him, but he was afraid to say hello loudly so that no one would know that we were talking to him. I told my friends that I was using Ted to improve my academic performance, but really, I just wanted to spend time with him. Although I was very shy of all my acquaintances. Therefore, when we went for a walk, I made appointments in the most remote cafes of our city, so that no one would see us there. Once, when Ted was walking me home, I realized that I should kiss him. He obviously didn't expect this, but I reached out and kissed him first. He was shocked and said that he also had feelings for me and offered to meet. At this point, I didn't know what to say to him. After all, if someone finds out that we were together, they will also start laughing at me, and all of my friends will turn away from me. But I could not be guided only by someone else's opinion. So I agreed, but asked not to tell anyone about it until I was ready. I already had a plan in my head. I decided to make Ted handsome, and one with whom it would not be embarrassing to appear in the company. I took him shopping and picked up a whole mountain of decent clothes for him. Then I made him change his terrible glasses for lenses, and waited for Ted to remove the braces. I also enrolled him in the gym and began to monitor his nutrition. Only a couple of months had passed, and Ted was no longer recognizable. My sense of taste did not fail me. Ted became a real handsome man, whom he was not ashamed to show to his friends and walk with him along the main street of our city in his best dress. All of my friends approved of my choice, and finally, I was happy to introduce him to everyone. Ted was not even recognized at first, but in the company, he showed himself so cool that everyone was shocked and quickly accepted him as one of their own. But my happiness did not last long. One day after school, one of my friends, Millie, approached Ted and told him about me, about how I laughed and discussed Ted behind his back, about the fact that I came up with terrible nicknames for him and said all sorts of nonsense about him. Ted realized that even when I started dating him, I was embarrassed by him. And being in a relationship with him, I continued to tell everyone that I communicate with him only because of my studies. And so it went until he became handsome. How upset he was. I thought you were different. What do you care about someone else's opinion? But it turned out that you are worse than all of them. Ted left me and started dating Millie. Moreover, all of my friends supported him. As if a few months ago, they themselves did not call Ted a loser. Now I'm completely alone. No boyfriend, no friends, no girlfriends. I understand that I got what I deserved, but it's still bitter. Have you had similar cases in your life? Write, and I will definitely answer in the comments. Oh, the message came. Millie? It's strange. After they started dating Ted, we don't talk. I'm mad at her for telling Ted so many bad things about me. Don't look at Instagram. It's all not true. Millie writes and asks to come. So what happened? And half an hour later, I wiped the tears of a friend. She was on the verge of hysteria because Ted, that harmless Ted, had pranked her. Millie has always been very careful about her impeccable reputation. She only dated good guys. She only got high marks in school. Millie wanted to be perfect for her parents. It stressed me out, of course. After all, it's strange to constantly pretend to please dad and mom. But as a true friend, I accepted Millie for who she is. But Ted hit where it hurts the most. Turns out he and Ted had been to the opening of a new nightclub the other day. It was fun, bright, provocative. Millie drank a few cocktails and became much bolder than usual. Don't think she did nothing wrong. Well, I danced on the dance floor, invited several guys to dance, played a game of desire. No one would have known about this if Ted had not filmed it surreptitiously on his phone, and then edited several videos that can be understood in different ways. He threw them into our school chat room, and unpleasant comments rained down on Millie. Miss Perfect is actually not perfect at all. Here's the real Millie, a shame, and stuff like that. Millie has been crying at home since morning and does not understand what to do with it. Heather, this is the end. I submitted my candidacy for the editor-in-chief of our school newspaper. I dreamed about it so much, and now, everything. I felt sorry for Millie. After all, we've been friends almost since first grade. Do not cry, we'll figure something out. I'll make Ted delete these videos. When Ted and I were dating, I made him go to the gym. At this time, he should be there. This is true. I looked into the hall and saw Ted admiring himself in front of the mirror. Suddenly, another guy came up to him and clapped Ted on the shoulder, said loudly, "The video turned out great." Well done. Come to the club in the evening. We will discuss how to further take revenge on these upstarts. Uh-oh. So it wasn't Ted's idea. The club. What's the club? And this guy seemed familiar to me. Looks like I'm going to work as a detective tonight. I fell on Ted's tail right after school. At 6, he left the house and walked quickly down the street. After 2 blocks, looking around, he stopped at a scuffed old door. Once there was a cafe with delicious ice cream, but now it's just abandoned. After knocking 3 times, Ted disappeared through the door. Apparently, someone let him in, so I need to get inside somehow. I walked around the building. Bingo! The black entrance and even open. After a couple of minutes, I already heard quiet voices inside the cafe. There were several guys there, and the one from the gym said, "Ted complied with our conditions. These upstarts will never get rid of this now." And suddenly, the light so fell on his face that I clearly saw this protruding mouth and crooked teeth. Yes, it's Doug Stigman. Exactly. I even covered my mouth with my hand to keep from screaming. School upstart. He also submitted his candidacy for the editor-in-chief of the newspaper. I rushed to Millie with all my might. I need to calm her down. Now I know how to fix it. When I told her everything and showed her the video from the cafe, yes, I filmed everything. Millie hugged me tightly. Let's promise each other that the guys will never come between us again. Certainly, I'm so glad we're friends again. And then everything was decided at lightning speed. Millie dropped a video from the cafe to Doug with a threat that she would show it to the school committee. And then Doug would face a tough punishment. And after a couple of minutes, the video that Ted edited at the nightclub disappeared from the network. And an apology to Millie followed. A week later, Millie became the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. This story raised her ratings a lot. Ted went around us on the fifth road, and I decided not to look for a new relationship just yet. I liked this story with the persecution of Ted so much that I am now studying the literature on forensic science, footprints, prints, a psychological profile of the criminal. Suddenly, I will become a real detective. What do you think?